Okay. Good day, everyone. Our speaker today on the topic of essential conversations is Laurie Miller. She is owner and administrator and co-founded Apple Care & Companion. She and her mother founded Apple Care in 2006. Apple Care is a caregiving agency in Dallas, Texas, providing daily care and companionship for the person receiving care, as well as for the family and caregivers who support their loved ones. Laurie is a well-known and respected advocate for older adults and their families, is very active in the elder care professional community, including DAGS, which is the Dallas Area Gerontological Society, and took a lead role in starting the first Compassion Fatigue Symposium in Dallas. The program today will reflect the work she has been doing in the Dallas-Fort Worth area about essential documents and essential conversations that family caregivers and older adults need to be having. Laurie, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to try to share my screen. I have a presentation that I'll talk through, but I am leaving a lot of time at the end just to have them more back and forth. So we could do that. But so let me try and see if I can figure this out. Okay. It's getting shared.
Uh-huh.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so I have it on my second screen, but
it's not in view mode. We can see it, but it's not in view mode. It's more it looks like a website page, but that's okay. We can read it fine.
No, we want it to be pretty. Let me try something else.
Should be view.
Let me.
I think that's it, but that's the end, right? I think.
Okay, so now what do you see?
Now we see the slide and then the other slides in the left hand. We're viewing the other small thumbnail size.
We don't want that.
Okay, let me go to view. 2 screens?
I have 3. Yeah, I have 2 screens.
Okay. When you go to the share, choose the screen that has the actual presentation popped up.
Sorry, guys.
Not at all.
Unfortunately, when you share slides, it pops up separately. So
that looks good.
Okay, can you
yes,
and that looks good. So can you still, if you see me, I'm going to be looking up all over the place.
We can see you.
I don't want you to see me. I want you to see the slide, but you can see the slide.
Yes.
And you can't see the little slide next to it.
We can see you.
Okay, but you can't see like the next slide. You can't.
No.
See okay, good. So we're good. All right. That's fun to do. So can you see that slide? The about me.
Still on the first slide.
Oh, that's not good. Let me try another thing. Now about how about that?
Yes. Now
okay, I got it
down.
Okay, so thank you, Xander, for introducing me. You said about my company. I also started Conversation Ready North Texas, which is all about this what we're going to talk about. And it's a website that everyone can use, and we'll go more into it later. It's all free, no pop-ups, really easy. And then most recently, I started Age Tech Now, which is a database of innovation and technology for aging adults. But what I love about this slide is that's my maternal grandmother and grandfather, and me and my 2 brothers. And my grandmother lived to be 100 and a couple of weeks, maybe a week and a half.
Wow.
And my grandfather at 96, which is amazing that they both have such longevity. And I'm going to skip to the next slide because that's not what we're here to talk about, my family, but we will. So what's a great thing to talk about over lunch? You know, death and taxes. That's what everybody wants to talk about today. which I don't think that's really the case, but it is difficult to talk about death. And I think we need to acknowledge that. And what we want to do is, rather than talk about death and dying today, I really want to talk about life and living, because that's just a way to reframe it and make it a little bit more easier to talk about. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how it makes all the difference in the world to just reframe the narrative about that. So just so everyone can be knowing ahead of time, what my goals are for everybody is to really understand the conversation that we're talking about, and understand the importance of why we need to have this conversation. And I want everyone to leave with tangible tools and actionable items that everyone can use today. And this really is all about you, is for you to have this conversation with your loved one, whoever that may be. And if you've already have it, to have it again. And then finally, to have the confidence that you can help your parent or your spouse or someone else have this conversation too, or even a friend. It's really important that we share this information with as many people as we can. And I do want to mention advanced directives, which are like your financial power of attorney or your medical power of attorney, your wills, your funeral arrangements, all of those legal documents. Those are so important to have. It's a gift to your loved one to plan ahead. It's a roadmap for your families, for your power of attorney. And, realize death is always, most likely, is always heartbreaking and sad. But planning ahead really can ease that burden of guilt family members have. And we like to call it estate planning for the heart. People plan their financial as best they can, but they really don't think of this other. So kind of think about it as estate planning for the heart. But today, we're not going to be talking about any of these legal documents. That's not the point of this conversation at all. But I think both are very important and both need to happen. But what I wanted to do right now is just tell you my story, because I think it'll help you understand the exact conversation that I'm talking about. So this is my mom and me, and that's my mom when she got married. And a little side note is I actually had her dress kind of remade, and I wore it when I got married, which is 35 years ago next month. So that's kind of a fun little fact. And my mom was wonderful. She was a social worker, and she actually worked for the state of Texas with older adults. She was a hospice volunteer. She cared for my grandparents. They lived in Florida, and when my grandfather had a stroke, she would go for a couple weeks, help my grandmother come back. And same thing with my grandmother when she was nearing her end. So my mother never shied away from talking about death or being involved with death. And we always lived in the same city, except for when I went to college. I was gone for 4 years, but other than that, we've always lived in the same city. So we went to a lot of funerals together. My friends' parents or grandparents or her friends, or we just went to funerals, and we'd always sit together, and she would elbow me and say, "Don't do this at my funeral," or "Do this at my funeral." I don't want that. It got to be kind of funny, but we did that a lot. My mom had, she had her power of attorney documents. She had a will. She had long-term care insurance, because she had worked with older adults and worked in nursing homes all the time. She had all of her ducks in a row. She had all of those documents. And Xander was right. We started the company in 2006 together because she was a social worker. She was my first administrator. So we worked together for about a year and a half. It was really lovely. But previous to that, in 2000, she was diagnosed with lung cancer, and she had surgery, chemo, radiation, and she did great. I mean, she did fantastic. And it was my kids were really young at the time, but for her, having cancer was a bump in the road, and she just, picked up and moved on. 3 years later, she had some more, a bad scan, had some more cells, and had to do chemo, radiation again. And then back to her normal self, babysitting, taking care of my kids, doing everything. She was great. And then in the summer of 2007, she had an incident that led her to the ER and then the ICU. And then we had a 9 months of roller coaster, ICU, long-term acute care, rehab, EU, IC, I mean, ER, it just, the whole thing. And my brothers and I had to make really difficult decisions the whole time. And we didn't know what to do. We developed a routine. My older brother would go visit her wherever she was before work. My middle brother would go after work. And my husband and I would usually go around lunchtime. And we did that almost every single day for 9 months until she passed away. And we look back on it and we realized we were not prepared at all. And here I thought we were set. I knew everything. I knew all about everything she wanted. So this whole conversation we're having today, it's not how you want to die or what happens to you after you die. It's about how you want to live at the end of your life. And it's a really big distinction. And the lessons that I learned and that I want to share, this took me years to really figure it out, and years of work of thinking, because I felt, to being in the hospital and the system for 9 months is really hard. And it was difficult. So number one, the most important lesson is this conversation is not just about pre-need and funeral arrangements. And that's important. And having the legal documents, those are all important. But this conversation is not a legal one. It's one of values and hopes and desires. And I realized there's never a good time to have this talk. So you can't wait for the perfect time. I went with my mom to every appointment for cancer. So whether she had a test, and then I'd go with her to the appointment for the results. Well, if she had a good result, it didn't seem like the right time to talk about how you want to live at the end of your life. If it was good, because that's, such a downer, who wants to do that? And then on the few times she had a bad scan, well, how insensitive. You can't talk about it then. So there's never a perfect time. So you just have to do it. And maybe the perfect time is today, tomorrow, right now. And I think it's never going to be comfortable, and it's never going to be the right moment. So that's really important. And also, there's no guarantees in life. During COVID, I had a friend, and he's this big bear of a guy, and you can't see me. I'm tiny. I'm 5 feet tall. I'm tinky. And this guy's my friend's husband, just this big bear, and he would, give me a hug, hello, and I would be lost in his hug. And they lived up east. They had moved away and lived up east, and he's in the picture of health also, big guy, athlete in college. And he had a heart attack and he passed away. He didn't even make it to the hospital. And it was really just a shock. I mean, just a real shock, because he was one of those bigger than life kind of guys. And so the celebration of life was over Zoom, because like I said, it was still during COVID. And so I was able to join that. And the kids, the son, he was out of college. The middle daughter was engaged to be married, and then the older one, just a little bit older. But they spoke, and it was so beautiful because they were sad, terribly sad. But he lived every day of his life telling them he loved them all, and his wife, loved them, proud of them. And it was just really wonderful. So they were really sad and grieving, but no guilt. No, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. And it's a really good lesson learned, that even if we're having this conversation about how we want to live at the end of our life, we always don't get that opportunity to make it that way. Sometimes you do have an accident and die, or sometimes you have a heart attack and die. So I think it's really important just to always leave nothing left unsaid. And I think that's a real important lesson. And also, this is not a conversation for older adults only. Everybody, 18 and older, right? Everybody should have this conversation. There's a lot of gun violence that's out of our control. If you remember the condo collapse in Miami a few years ago, that was, all ages lived in that condo. Car accidents. There's just talking about our mortality, it just helps the living process, and it helps those who are living deal with that death. And it's just really important. So that brings us to the Conversation Project. Conversation Project is a nonprofit out of Boston, and it was founded by Ellen Goodman. If you know her, she's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and author. And her mother had dementia. And when she had to make decisions for her mother, she just didn't know if she was doing anything right. They hadn't talked about it. And then her mom couldn't express her wishes. And she was just fraught with guilt that every decision was the wrong one. And she just felt terrible when her mom passed away, that she didn't know if she respected her wishes or not. So she founded the Conversation Project, and the mission is to make sure that everybody's wishes for end-of-life care are both expressed and respected. So not only do we need to say them out loud, we need to respect those wishes. And the Conversation Project feels these conversations should happen early and often, and around the kitchen table and not in the ICU. When I look back at my brothers and I making some decisions, literally it was over my mom, we were in the ICU trying to make these decisions. And that is no place to either start thinking of it or be making a decision. And as a parent, talking about your own end-of-life wishes really is a gift to your children. And as an adult child, opening up that door for your parent could calm their fears as well. And I think it's a two-way street, and everybody should have this conversation and help others have it. So the ConversationReadyNorthTexas.com website just really makes all this stuff easier to find. The Conversation Project's website is fantastic, but it's so robust and so rich. Sometimes you get overwhelmed with all the blogs and go down these rabbit holes and you can't find anything. So I created this just to make it very easy for everyone to find the free material. There's no ads, there's no pop-ups, it's all free, downloadable. And that's just kind of what it looks like. So the conversation, it's really, oh, this is my lovely mother-in-law. And a gift I received from my mother-in-law when my mom was in the hospital and after she had passed away, my mother-in-law told me that is not what she would want. She would not want that kind of end of her life. What a great gift that is. She has dementia now, so we know kind of what she wants. She would not want a long, drawn out process. Oh, and something I forgot to mention about my mom that was really important. With my brothers and I going and seeing her every day, that was enough for her. That's what mattered to her. And it took me a few years to realize that. Had we not been in the same city and had all three of us not been able to go all the time, I don't think she would have made it as long as she did. So even though she never expressed beforehand what she wanted, and she might not have been able to think about that, but we would go and you could just see her light up when we were there, even if it was for 20 minutes over lunch or something. But that was what mattered to her. So when you want to have this conversation, and let's say you are the adult child and you want your parent to have this conversation, you need to do it first, because it's a hard conversation to have. You cannot ask someone to have this conversation if you haven't done it. I mean, you really have to walk the walk before you can talk the talk. And I'm going to give you tools and ways to do it. But you can't expect someone else to do it unless you've done it yourself. And actually, when I started working with the Conversation Project like 8 years ago, I did not want to be a hypocrite myself, and I hadn't had this conversation. So one of that Thanksgiving, my son was still in college, and my daughter, when she lived at a state, when they came home for Thanksgiving, I told them we're having this conversation, and they were not real thrilled about it. It wasn't going to be a long conversation. But what happened was, as much as I didn't want to hear what they had to say, that changed everything. So it's not a monologue, it's a dialogue. It's a real conversation. So I shared my wishes, my husband shared, very short, not a long, it doesn't have to be a long process. A very short, I'll show you the next step, what we did. And then they did it too. And that changed it, because then we're all involved and we're all learning from each other. And you kind of break that ice that first time. It doesn't have to be a real long, in-depth conversation. And we were all different. And at the time, my kids were in their 20s and we were in our 50s. And I know the answers would be different now. So at the time, my son was in college, and now he's married and a whole different, a different human. And I'm sure his thoughts are different. And in my daughter, she had a best friend who had an accident and died sophomore year in college. She didn't go to the same school. And when we had this conversation, it was still too raw. I mean, it was still so hard, her getting over his death. It was such a shock. But now his parents had started a scholarship in his name, and she's on the board. So she's been immersed with him all these years and is on the scholarship board where they choose a young person for the scholarship money going off to college. And she can talk about death much easier. And she's really, she's changed so much in these 8 years since we've done it. So people change, and that's why we have this conversation. And just a little, this is my daughter and me at my son's graduation, and that's my son and daughter-in-law at their wedding. So how do you start this conversation? I'm telling you how hard it is. So how do you do it? And this is a beautiful quote from Dr. Atul Gawande. If you've ever read Being Mortal, or if you haven't, I suggest you read it. He's a neurosurgeon and author. And he writes, "Our ultimate goal, after all, is not a good death, but a good life until the very end." And I think that kind of sense says it all. And that's what's really most important, is what we want to help with everybody. So the conversation project has all these guides, and afterward I'll go into a little more depth about each one and I'll show them to you. But they're really great. They had a lot of thought put into them, a lot of research went behind them. There's the one we're going to talk about most, called the Conversation Starter Guide. There's one called Your Guide to Choosing a Healthcare Proxy or Your Power of Attorney, and a Guide to Being a Healthcare Proxy. And we'll talk about that more at the end. There's a guide for talking with your healthcare team. Just a side note, Medicare actually has a billing code that the doctor will get paid to have this conversation. So you can use this guide so your ducks are in the row and you know exactly what you want to say, but you can have the conversation with your doctor or the nurse practitioner or someone in the doctor's office. And they actually can bill Medicare for it. So they're happy to have this conversation, but it's really important that you do. There's also a guide for caregivers of people with dementia. And there's even a guide for caregivers of a child with a serious illness. So these are some really great guides. They're all free, downloadable. You can download them in a PDF. You can fill them out and email them to people. I mean, they're really helpful. And so what they are, there's a lot of good notes in them. But the first question is really, just to get prepared, is think about what matters to you. So what matters to me through the end of my life is blank. And even though my mom couldn't express it beforehand, because we never talked about it, or she might not have been able to, but for us, being able to see her was what mattered to her. And I now know we did everything, all the decisions we made were the right ones. When we had this conversation with my children, when my husband and I did, I just said one thing. All I said was, what matters to me at the end of my life is that I'm not alone. Ideally, I would be with a loved one, a friend, family member, but if not, I don't want to be alone. I'll take a paid caregiver, a nurse, a volunteer. I just want another human with me. And interesting, my son, who was 21 at the time, thought, he had never thought about it, but thought having a stranger would be awful. Like, he did not understand why I would rather be alone than have a stranger with me if I was dying. And I need to have the conversation with him to see if he still feels that way. So a lot of people, all different kinds of things. So here's some other things that people have said. I love having my sheets untucked around my feet. peaceful, pain-free, with nothing left unsaid. And this makes me kind of think of my friend who had the heart attack. He left this world with nothing left unsaid. And I don't know how peaceful it was, but it was quick. I think that, a lot of people could say that too. I've done some workshops and I learn something new every time I do them. One woman said she has a very high threshold for pain, but no threshold for being nauseous. So she would want her family to know if there was a treatment and it was going to cause her nausea, she might not want that. I had another friend who said she's very very vision impaired, and she said, and she's imagining herself, and she's older, she's in her 80s. She's imagining herself like bedbound at the end, and she said, I want my glasses on because if I'm kind of sleeping or waking up, I want to see who's around me. And I thought that was really great, and how wonderful to be the family member to know you're helping out in such a great way. And this question and this whole guide, like I said, it's not legal. It's all value-based. It's all, we need the legal stuff too, but this is kind of before that. And it's not medical. There's times to talk about CPR and feeding tubes. This isn't really it. It's just desires and values, no right or wrong. And you can change your mind all the time, and you probably will as you age. And the question is really to get in to think about it. I know someone or a lot of people they're going on hospice, and the big question is, where are we going to put the bed, the hospital bed? And I know some people want the hospital bed in the middle of the den. They want to see the comings and goings. They want it bright. They want to be near the window to see outside. And other people want to be in the bedroom, drapes drawn, quiet, dark. And those are great things to know. I mean, maybe you know them, maybe you don't. But a lot of people have definite opinions on that. And that's kind of what we're doing. If it's okay, Xanda, I'd love if anyone has something, if they want to put it in the chat, and we can talk about it later. Because something I've learned is, as adult learners, we learn so much more from each other than it is unbelievable. So if you feel like you want to share, obviously no one has to, but if you feel like you want to share, kind of put in the chat what matters to you, and we can kind of look at it and talk about it at the end, because we learn every time we learn something new. And then back to the guide. The guide helps you plan your talk. So there's about 3 pages of scales that are kind of like this one. When there's a medical decision to be made, I would like to know, I would like my health care team to do whatever they think is best, all the way to, I want to say in every decision. And personally, I'm kind of in the middle. I don't want to have a say in everything because I don't know everything, but I also don't want the health care team just to do what they want. So personally, I'm kind of in the middle, but that's still helpful, I think, for family to know where you are. What are your concerns about medical treatment? This question, actually, they did a survey on, and these are the 2 extremes. People worry that they won't get enough care, and they're going to worry, or all the way, I worry I'll get too much care. And I kind of tend toward that. I worry I'll get too much care because I know, and it's doctors want to fix. Doctors don't like defeat, and to them, death is defeat, and it's not. But that would be me. I worry that people are going to just try, and that's too much. But some people no, they want everything. So this is a really great scale to know, to help your loved ones and even help you kind of get your head around what we're even talking about. And there's like 3 more pages of these kind of scale questions. And then the next question, and this is really to envision who, where, and when. So who is it that you want to talk to? Like, do you want to talk to your spouse? Do you want to talk to your parent, your adult children, a faith leader, a doctor, who is it that you want to have this first conversation? You can have it with everybody, but who's that first one? Maybe it's a friend you want to practice with. And where, actually envision where you're having it. Someone said they want to have it in a car while they're driving, so they don't have to have eye contact. They're just driving straight ahead and they don't have to look at the person they're talking to. A lot of people think the kitchen table, we call these issues kitchen table issues, that are very comfortable. Everything happens over the kitchen table. On a walk, we're doing Zoom right now. There's something to be said with having that screen in front of you. It takes away a little bit of the warmth, but maybe you want that. So where do you see yourself having this conversation? And when? That's holds you accountable to kind of put a time, the next time everyone's together. Or yesterday, Mother's Day, was a great day to have. It really is a gift. I know people think that I'm crazy saying you're going to have this talk on Mother's Day, but if you're all together, what a great day to have it. And the when, so early and often. So when someone graduates high school, and either they're going off to college, or maybe they're going into the service or getting a job, that's a great time to have that conversation. When people go into the Army, they have to sign, or any service, they have to sign all the paperwork, all the legal advanced directives. But why not have this conversation then at the same time? Often it's better to have this conversation before there's a crisis. That I can tell you from experience. Maybe you have it every decade, every time there's a major life event, marriage or divorce or having children, going on Medicare. If there's another death in the family, that's a great time, because you could use that as an icebreaker. Oh, when Uncle Joe passed away, it was so good for the family because he had shared his wishes, and it's a great icebreaker. Or maybe it was awful because no one knew what to do. If you're diagnosed with a serious illness, that might be a time to revisit what your thoughts are. So it's good to envision where you're having the conversation. And I want to read this poem, or this letter. Let me find it. This is called "Don't Panic, It's Okay," and it's written by Dr. Karen Boudreau, and it's a letter to her family, and I think it's great. If you're faced with a decision that you're not ready for, it's okay. I'll try to let you know what I would want for various circumstances. But if you come to something we haven't anticipated, it's okay. And if you come to a decision point and what you decide results in my death, it's okay. You don't need to worry that you've caused my death. You haven't. I will die because of my illness or my body failing or whatever. You don't need to feel responsible. Forgiveness is not required. But if you feel bad, responsible, or guilty, first of all, don't. And second of all, you are loved and forgiven. If you're faced with a snap decision, don't panic. Choose comfort, choose home, choose less intervention, choose to be together at my side, holding my hand, singing, laughing, loving, celebrating, and carrying on. I will keep loving you and watching you and being proud of you. I think that's lovely, and says so much. You really kind of know what she would want, and I think that's lovely, and that's on the website. And this is the website, Conversation Ready North Texas, and all the guides are on there. There's videos. There's other helpful websites. That poem is on there too. And before I stop the share, I do want to show you this picture. This is my Aunt Jerry. I showed you my grandmother. This is her daughter, and she passed away in December, and she was 102 and a half. And amazing. My Aunt Jerry was the most amazing lady. But I have more that I can share, but I'm going to stop now. So do you see the screen again?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So I can show you. I don't know if there's any questions or chats, but I can show you.
Not yet.
So I'll show you what the guide looks like. So if you could see, and these are all printable. You can print them in black and white. You don't have to print them in the color. And they just have these scales. So all these different questions,
Uh-huh.
the ones we did, and there's some really good, what I really like is the icebreakers. Like how do you start? And there's a list of icebreakers. And the best one that you could do is, you attended this session today and you heard about it and you just want to share the information. But a lot of people will just fill this out send it to their loved one, have them fill it out, and then you discuss it, you talk about it. The other thing that I want to mention, which is really important, is caregivers of people with Alzheimer's or dementia. It's the same idea of the conversation starter guide, but it helps you bring that person to the table. And it'll give you examples of, if they're in early stage, how you can really include them. And as their disease progresses, how you and your family can maybe bring them into the conversation without really bringing them in. Just, what would mom want if we did this? You know, and then the family can talk about, well, do you remember when she was younger and she always said this? So it's really helpful. And I actually had a friend who went to one of my workshops, and he was here in Dallas. The dad lived in New York, and he had a brother in California and another brother. They were all over the country, and they also didn't get along. Everyone had different opinions. And so the dad was going on hospice with dementia in assisted living. And so they all flew to where the dad was, and there was a stepmom involved who also had her own agenda and what she thought was best. Everyone thought. They used this together. He said they sat at a cafe for 3 hours and used the workbook and kept saying, what would dad want? And all of their, what their priorities melted away, because everybody was fixed on dad. And then they took the book and gave it to the hospice workers and the assisted living workers. And it was wonderful. And he said the dad died about a week and a half later. And it was a smooth, and they couldn't believe it because it was a pretty dysfunctional family. It was so smooth and so beautiful because they had been able to talk about this before he died, and he died the way they thought he wanted. This is another new one. I didn't even mention it. It's a what matters to me. So if you're diagnosed with a serious illness, how you even wrap your brain around it. And this helps you, guide you through that. But the other two ones that are really important are the guide to being a proxy and a guide to choosing a proxy. And this is really important. If you know some of what you want, and you think you have to have your spouse be your power of attorney, you don't have to, especially, or your adult, the oldest child. You really need to look at the personality. Can they carry out your wishes? I've had adult children say, no, I can't let you go. I'm not going to. I know you don't want to be, whatever it is, if you're talking on the medical side, you don't want to be hooked up to machines, or you don't want whatever. And the adult daughter says, I can't do that. Well, she doesn't have to be your power of attorney. You have someone else who can do your wishes. But that's why it's so important that you tell whoever you legally assign to be who's going to speak for you, they need to do what you want, not what they want. And so that's really important. And if someone asks you to be theirs and they won't tell you what their wishes are, that would be a very difficult thing. So it's a good way to talk about this conversation, especially if you do have your advance directives in order, to share with the person you've nominated or you've assigned to be your power of attorney. You need to have that conversation with that person for sure. That's really important. So,
and Laurie,
yes.
I posted the website for the conversationproject.org, and I see that there's a link to each of the guides.
Yes. And actually there's even, if you go on the website to videos, there's even an audio book. So you can listen to it also. And it's Ellen Goodman reading it. So there's all different ways to access it too.
A question, the conversationproject.org, someone has said that there is a site that has Texas in it, in the URL.
Mine is Conversation Ready NTX, which stands for North Texas. That's just, Conversation Ready NTX is the one that I created. And there's more stuff than just the Conversation Project information on there. But yeah, all of it is free. The Conversation Project has a great blog to read, but yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Conversation Ready NTX.
That's it. Looks like Minerva put it in.
Okay, good.
.com.
Great.
Yes. So any other questions or thoughts or?
You said you were going to ask, if I recall, what some of the things that people wanted.
The biggest thing of the question, what matters to me, the majority of people will say is they want to be pain-free.
Mm-hmm.
That's the probably first. And then what my wishes are is don't want to be alone. That's a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people say. I had this other gentleman who said, and you know, he pictured himself in like I don't know why he pictured himself, but he pictured himself in the ICU kind of hooked up and his family all standing around, like not knowing if they need to turn something off. And his wishes, if he would want his dog to be there. And if his dog could sense him, then don't turn anything off. But if the dog felt that he was gone, then that was the family.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I never would have thought that. I never would have gone there, but that was real interesting. Another person said, I want to be near nature. If I can't be outside, I want to be near the window and I want the window open.
Mm-hmm.
So those are great. I knew someone who said she was always perfectly coiffed.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, make sure I have lipstick on. And I think it's, you know, it's interesting of where someone thinks of themselves kind of toward the end. But I think, and it changes. I mean, I think when you're in your 60s, it's going to be different than when you're in your 70s and 80s. It's just like my son, when he was in college, with not being married, and hopefully they'll have children soon, you know, things change in your different life events. And the conversation changes, but you have it, like I said, early and often. And once you have it, you kind of break that ice a little bit, you chisel away. And then the next time you have it a little longer and get a little deeper. But I think it's the sharing and the talking together that really is the magic. Because I was doing a round table, and I think it was a table of 10 people, and they were most of them were older adults. And I asked we did an introduction, we asked the question, and I turned to the guy next to me, and he was 81. And I looked at him and like, he looked like a deer in headlights. And he just looked at me so scared. And I said, let me start this way. So we went around this way. And then by the time we got back to him, he answered it very well. And he said, I'll be honest, I've never contemplated my death.
Wow.
So that's, yeah, very interesting. So I think that's interesting. So everyone's at a different place. And you have this conversation the first time, it could be very short, and it could just be the one question, and that's it. And then you have it again, and you have it again, and then it becomes easier to have and get deeper and deeper into the conversation.
And just want to remind people, the poll is on your screen now, and please take a few minutes to answer those very simple questions. Someone has made the comment, I had never even thought of wishing to have my fur babies around me. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's great, because that's a huge, that's so important, and also gives someone a lot of comfort and peace.
Anyone else want to share even what you would most like at the end of life? One thing I struggle with, Melissa says, one thing I struggle with is when someone answers the question, what matters to me? And the answer is something that really cannot be guaranteed or controlled. Excellent comment.
Yeah. Yeah, and that happens a lot. I mean, I know the biggest one we get is if someone says, don't ever put me in a nursing home, or don't ever, whatever. Well, that might be unrealistic, or, you know, I only want to die at home. I don't want to go to the hospital, or something. I mean, I think that just needs to be qualified where, well, if it's not safe, or if there's, if it's determined that we have to do whatever. I think you kind of can bring that up. I think if someone does have to go to somewhere they really didn't want to, you make it as home-like as possible. You can bring their own comforter, and you can make the situation as comfortable as you can. But yeah, something that's not feasible, I think that is something that's okay to say. We'll do the best we can, but if there's no, things cost money, and if they don't have insurance, they don't have the funds to do whatever it is they want, and it's physically not possible. Yeah, that's unrealistic. That's good to know now, and so maybe you could help figure out what it is that they want. Is that they really wanted to be with their dog, and maybe that's what they're saying. They don't want to go to the hospital because they want to stay with their animal or something. But yes, that happens a lot. And that is a gift to get now, so that hopefully you can not change their mind, but make them understand some things are out of your control. And if you're the power of attorney, that just may not be able to happen depending on the circumstance. If they needed, high level nursing care and it can't be done at home.
Melissa went on to say, such as I don't want to be afraid, or I just don't want my loved ones to be afraid. That's under that category of things we can't control.
Right.
Stephanie has said, my adult child with mild autism will most likely outlive us. These guidebooks will be great to use for a variety of conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think even filling out the book and giving it to someone is a great first step. And then you can, and again, and you go back and forth and share each other's wishes.
I have a question. Do you speak to groups about these issues? Is there a group of you, so you're not the one that's doing it all the time, or?
Yeah, there are. I know in Dallas, well, I guess everything can be done on Zoom. Yeah, there's a few of us who do that. Yeah, there's
just
several.
Contact you.
Yeah, and I can talk to other people, and depending on the timing and stuff, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting. I mean, this is great to do, but again, like when you're on a round table and you have the small discussions, we learn so much from each other, just like the animal. No one ever thought of that. I wear contacts, and I mean, I wouldn't be able to see the screen if I didn't have my contacts or glasses on. And I can't believe I never thought of that either. I definitely want my glasses, because you want to know who's around you. And that's such a great little tiny thing, but would make the world of difference.
Or your hearing aids, or other things that were part of your daily life.
Yeah, or what's someone mentioned something about being scared. And I think that's good to tease out, and what is it? Are they scared? Because I know with my mom, when we knew it was getting to the end, she was worried about my middle brother. And we kind of said, he'll be okay, we'll make sure, and to put her at peace, to figure out what she was scared about. And whether that's, if someone's religious, to make sure that they have the guidance from their faith, or if it's pain, make sure that, we can control the pain, or what they're scared about the unknown, which is a very common, most people are. But the more you talk about it and the more you revisit it, a lot of times the less fearful people can be.
I want to make a comment in the time we have left. I just went through about 4.5, almost 5 months of my husband being in and out of the hospital with fractures, and he had a back surgery and one thing and another. We were in 4 different skilled nursing care centers, 5 hospitalizations. And what I was shocked about is that so many medical professionals, doctors and aides, do not understand pain control. There's been so much lately about the fear of opioid. And so I would encourage anyone who has a loved one who is on a pain management program, or who, like my mother, she had a low pain tolerance, to carry a doctor's order, which is what we had to resort to override what was being put into the record. My husband went into withdrawal. It was 22 hours before we got it all straightened out. And I think it is a fear that the medical professionals have, but pain at the end of life especially is a huge deal. And for someone who's been dealing with pain for many years, they need to be able to have the relief that they need. So that means talking to their pain management professional or their primary care physician and make sure that there are adequate records and adequate orders so that loved one isn't in so much pain.
And that's something else. People have a big fear of hospice, but that's like the number one priority of hospice is pain
Yes,
management.
pain management.
And totally, and the fear of hospice is, oh, that means, you know, my mom's gonna die. No,
No.
because you have to be evaluated and approved, and you can also get off of hospice. You could get better and you get discharged from hospice, but their number one goal is pain management. So if it's a situation like that, I always recommend call in and at least get a hospice consult and see if they're even approved, because you can, a lot of times when you get the pain under control, the patient does better and they live longer. People die quickly on hospice is because they get on hospice too late.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
If you got on hospice appropriately, it'd be 6 months before someone passed away. But very often they live longer than that because their pain's under control and they're getting the attention. So not related to this, our topic, but don't fear hospice at all.
Right.
I know a lot of people do. And I think hospice is really a wonderful, can be a wonderful tool to use if you're a caregiver.
And more you hear the word palliative care. And isn't that the goal of palliative care is comfort? And
yeah, hospice is actually under the umbrella of palliative care. And a lot of hospice companies are taking out the word hospice and adding palliative just because it's more palatable to stomach almost. But yeah, and if you're not appropriate for hospice, you can't get on hospice. So it's not like, you know, but they're really good on the pain management because they understand how important it is to regulate that pain.
Good point. Okay. Roshan Davis says, I sleep in my glasses now, and I never thought of that either. The idea of that's what I would want on. Okay, that's the end of the questions. Anybody have a call-in question or anything else that they want to put into?
Sandra,
Yes.
Shian Moraida put on that, are we allowed to distribute these conversation starter guides to the community as a resource connection, or do we solemnly have to recommend they look up the link?
No, you can actually, there's guidelines, but you could actually, if you're a professional, you could put your logo on them and you say, generously distributed by, like, let's say I wanted my company, Apple Care, I could put on there generously distributed by Apple Care and Companion. You could put your logo on there, and yeah, you could print them out and do that. But you could lead people to the website, or you could have them printed out with your logo on them too. You just have to say, I think it's generously donated by. It's on the Conversation Project's website on those guidelines, or let me know and I can find it and I'll send it to you if anyone is interested.
Melissa Nielsen says, thank you. That makes sense what you were just talking about. Maybe you just have to probe a little more when someone says something like, I don't want to be put in a nursing home. Like, tell me more about that. So they might share that it's related to not wanting to be alone or not able to have pets, visits, etc. Jennifer said, okay, Jennifer says, thanks so much for the webinar. Other thanks from Shian. Really been great. Make sure that there aren't any pending or new. Anything you'd like to say in summary or your last words that you want to leave our listeners with?
I think just starting this conversation, even if it's a 5-minute, and remember, it's a dialogue, not a monologue. If you want to share, if you want to know what your parents' desires are, and you really want to know what theirs is, you share yours first. And then you say, what would you want, Mom? And really make it an uneven keel, make it a conversation. And I think just do it. I think don't wait for the perfect time. Just do it tomorrow, even if it's a 5-minute conversation. Just break that ice and get it started.
Okay.
It's a gift. It's a real gift.
It is a gift. Thank you again, Laurie. She's always a leader in her community, and look what all she has given us today. A lot of websites, a lot of information. Thank you again. And
Thank you.
we will see everybody next month.